Donald Trump has been in office for 1 year. And in the weeks before the inauguration, hundreds of interesting articles were written trying to make sense of his unexpected victory. What was this America that voted for Trump? Who were these forgotten voters in America's Heartland and Rust Belt who were left behind by globalization and the new economy? And then, after Trump took office, these valuable conversations vanished almost overnight. Now, all we were talking about was the latest scandal and gossip from the White House and from Congress. And my hope that this election would somehow change the political landscape, that Republicans would finally have to care about their voters and not just about rich donors, and that Democrats would fight again for the common man, proved unfortunately short-lived. Perhaps journalists and politicians simply don't care. I've been looking for a more charitable explanation for why these conversations disappeared so quickly. And one is that, frankly, no one knows what to do. I mean, how can you save good industrial jobs when labor is so much cheaper in places like China? I'm not sure I have an answer to that question. Do you? And I was thinking about this the other day when I realized I actually do have an answer. A few years ago, for a book I wrote, I researched some organizations that positively thrive against cheap labor competition. For instance, in a rural area in France, there is a brass foundry that should have closed its doors long ago, like all the other foundries did. It used to be run traditionally, just like any other factory, with several layers of hierarchy in the factory, with pretty unengaged workers that simply showed up to produce whatever pieces some people in the planning department and HR had allocated them to. And then in the 1980s, a new boss took over, and he radically simplified the factory structure. The factory now consists of a number of self-managing teams that work directly for a customer, like Volkswagen, Audi, or Volvo. And with that change, the results have been spectacular. All Favi's competitors went bust or moved to China, but Favi holds a 50% market share in Europe. And despite Chinese competition, for the last 30 years, Favi makes so much profit that most years, through profit sharing, workers make 16, 17, or even 18 months of salary. Favi is thriving when conventional wisdom tells us that it should have closed long ago. And there are similar examples in the US. Sun Hydraulics is a firm in Florida that makes hydraulic equipment. It's also operating based on a large degree of self-management. And its financial results are also unbelievable. It operates in a super cyclical industry, and yet it hasn't lost money once in more than 40 years, not even during the worst of recessions. In rural California, Morningstar has become the dominant producer of ketchup and diced tomatoes in the US, and frankly, the biggest one in the world. Its 4 factories are also self-managing, and it's churning out outrageous profits, even though its products are a total commodity. So what does this all mean? It means that the real killer of blue-collar jobs might not be China, but might be our current management methods. When you have a pyramid where a few bosses, float far above everyone else and make lots of decisions about things they hardly know, you disempower people, doing the real work that matters. You create bureaucracy, you invite politics and power struggles, you make bad decisions. Such a system creates a lot of waste and creates little value. Now, in the last year, since Trump got elected, I stumbled upon 2 extraordinary group of people who have brought this thing I knew to a whole new level. One is in the Basque Country, an industrial region of Spain. In 1991, Irizar, a company that produces buses, was bankrupt. And it brought in a new boss, Koldo Sarachaga, who brought in self-management practices. And the company not only got out of bankruptcy, but quickly blossomed and started opening up factories all over the world. Its quality became legendary. Harvard's business cases were written about it. And after 14 years, Caldo felt he had done his work there and he left the company. But since he hasn't retired, he's repeated the trick with 50 small and medium-sized businesses in the vast country. Most of these companies also faced bankruptcy. And yet the first thing Caldo and his colleagues do when they come in is to raise the lowest salary and to say that no one will be fired. Now imagine that in a company that faces bankruptcy. They quickly upgrade the management system, introduce self-management, and time and again the results are there. So they've proven dozens of times that you can save businesses simply by discarding our current management practices that are really outdated. And then I came across a second example, a gentleman called Robert Chapman, who runs an industrial company called Barry-Wehmiller in the United States. And he's performed exactly the same thing. Barry-Wehmiller and a sister company have so far made 60 acquisitions, mostly of industrial struggling companies in America's heartland. And it has achieved remarkable turnarounds and growth trajectories for these organizations. And mind you, Barry-Wehmiller doesn't even really transform the management structure. It simply creates a powerful culture where people care for one another. All managers go through training and are brought to reflect on what they call the awesome responsibility of leadership. And every time, the results are spectacular. What I'm talking about here is not wishful thinking, but facts on the ground. We can save companies in the Rust Belt that are closing down. We can make them flourish and create jobs. Politicians might have no answer for disgruntled voters left behind by globalizations, but I do believe that something can be done. Let's spread the word that the problem is not so much China as it is outdated management. Saving companies and creating good jobs in America as a heartland can be done. And I believe that 1 year after this divisive election, this is a hopeful message that needs to be heard. So please share this message. And if you're interested, there are references for further reading in the YouTube comments below this video here.